Today is obviously we're going to be doing skies, and this is really just all about how to make skies a little bit perhaps more interesting than what they otherwise might be. Skies can often be a minor part of a painting, in which case it doesn't really matter too much about it. You know, a simple sky will do. But in other cases, the painting could be 3/4 sky or 2/3 sky, in which case we need quite a lot of interest in the sky. And today I'm going to try and show you some different ways of doing skies. At least once my heart rate gets back to normal, we'll try that anyway. So, well, first of all, there's the plain blue sky, and I want to cover this, and I'm sure you can all do this, but it's important to, I think, the way watercolor is painted in general, and it's important that we know how to do a good simple flat sky. And the reason is that skies are a blue sky doesn't have any marks in it. It's just a plain blue sky, or a grey sky is just a plain grey sky, and it's important that we get that. So I'm going to try to show you what to do. And the important thing is wetness. Everything has to be really wet, and if things are not wet, then your paint will not flow, and you'll end up with lines in the paint. So I'm going to use Cobalt blue here because it's a good sky colour and it saves me having to mix anything just to get things started. You can see the great big pool of colour that I've got, and it's quite a big brush. This is a Rosemary Co series 888 goat wash brush, and this is a 1-inch one, and Rosemary Co do really good brushes. And I'm painting, all the paper I'm using today is Milford paper from St Cuthbert's Mill, and they also make Bockingford and Saunders, but this one's Milford. I particularly like Milford. Now, another thing you can do to help the paint flow is spray the paper a little bit. So I've got my little spray here, and I'm just going to give this, we'll call it just a spritz. I'm not really soaking the paper. I'm just giving it a little spray, and what that does is slow down the drying time, gives you a little bit more time. In your palette, make sure your brush is full. So in other words, no wiping the brush in the side of the palette like that. Dip it in. If you hold it up and give it a shake, it should drip. That's how wet it should be. And you simply start at the top and work down. Now the idea is that your brush should always be full. So that means dipping in constantly. And then you pick up that. If you don't have that bead, you're not wet enough. Now I know some of you there's a competition on, and you can win my two DVDs, and it's really for the painting of the best sky picture, and you can enter that. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. We'll carry on with this. So the important thing is to get that done pretty quickly, and even with that, I've got a couple of little lines. I don't know whether you can see, you can't see those. So let's just give that another bit of a spray, and if you do that, you should find all those little lines will just slowly disappear. And keep going down. Now the sky will often get lighter as it goes down, so you can simply just add more water to things and then just keep going right down to the bottom. And that same thing applies for any type of flat sky. Got a couple of little lines there, that's talking too much. And then at the bottom of these little demos that I'm doing, I'll do a little bit of a landscape or something just for interest's sake. So we'll use some Ultramarine for that, and a little bit of burnt sienna, and we'll just get a little bit of that in. That's not going to be very strong, but there we go. So, but I'm not sure what that'll be later on, but it'll be something. So that's this sort of flat sky. So I'm going to put this to one side, and I'm going to get another one just like that. And this time I'm going to do well, what we get quite a lot of, we get quite a lot of rainy skies and things like that. So I'm going to try a sort of slightly stormy sky. So again, I'm going to, the thing about stormy skies is you can do almost anything. So I'm going to make about 2/3 of the paper the sky, and 1/3 some sort of landscape. Not quite sure what yet. Again, spray, a little spray. And then for a stormy sky, what we don't want is just a plain flat grey sky. Instead, I am going to use a variety of colours and just let them all blend. And one of my favourite mixes for stormy skies is a mix of phthalo blue, which is also called Winsor blue. It's got lots of names actually. Intense blue, that's another one, but they're all the same. It's a turquoisey blue. And I'm going to mix some cadmium red with that. And it gives you a sort of fierce looking greyish colour, as you can see there. And I'm going to be using that in this stormy sky. But we'll start off with a little bit where it's not just so bad. So again, notice how wet all of this is. And I'm just going to throw this on. Wet, that's the important thing. Keep everything wet. Then I'm going to use my nice rich mix of the phthalo blue and the red. Again, make it a bit stronger. Now the thing is, don't worry. Don't worry about anything. If your paper is wet, everything is good. It's when your paper is dry you have a problem. What do we do here? A little bit of light. So this is just plain water. Again, don't worry about that. Again, in with the plain water. Now what else can we'll get a little bit of blue. Sometimes you get some blue even in a stormy sky, so we'll get a little bit of blue in. And maybe a bit more of that nice rich, get a bit more red in it. Now the nice thing about this mix is that it separates as it dries, so you'll find all sorts of nice things happening. Now the thing about that is this is the time when people very often panic, but having had the morning I've had so far, getting a painting slightly not going the way I was expecting it to is the least of my worries. So this morning I don't worry about this anyway, but do not worry about what's happening so long as everything is wet. That's the thing, so long as everything is wet. So we'll bring that down and we'll maybe have a sea or something down here. So for the sea, we'll get a little bit more blue. And we'll just do a few lines across, and then that will do us in the meantime for this, because all these things need to dry before we can do much with them. So we've got a big dark cloud there, so we'll get another dark cloud down here. And over there. Okay, that doesn't look terribly interesting, but just wait until later. This is when I hand it off to someone else who can actually finish the painting. No, I don't. I'll bring this back shortly. So we'll put that one away. And next. So another one. Now remember, I've still do some things with those first two, so we're not finished with them yet. But now I'm going to do what might be considered to be the sort of classic sky with clouds in it. This is the one that I suppose we like to use mostly in our paintings, because we like our paintings to be done in nice sunny, warm, blue sky, sunshine, shadows, that sort of thing. So again, this is very similar to, well, the beginning of it is very similar to the first wash, the simple flat blue wash. So again, we'll get plenty of that cobalt blue mixed up. And just as I'm mixing this, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. It's the 50th anniversary of Search Press, and they're having some free book downloads, and you can find the information. Monica can direct you to the information for that. Also, during the Patchings Festival, there are all sorts of prizes being given away by Search Press. Again, there'll be details of that, including some signed copies of my books. And that will be, again, I'll pick a few paintings that you send in as a result of sort of having a look at this. Remember, this will also be on afterwards, so you don't have to panic and sort of be rushing and painting along. You can watch it again if you need to. Okay, let's see. So again, a little bit of a spray, just to retard the drying. Now this time we have to be thinking about white clouds. So what do I want to do with the white clouds? Well, I'll tell you what I want to do with the white clouds. First of all, I'm going to clear a little section here in my palette. And I am then going to just mix up a little bit. In fact, I'll use a different brush. This is the other brush that I love using, which is another Rosemary Co brush. And this is the series 402 Sable and Synthetic. And I'm going to mix up very weak burnt sienna. And this is to get some warmth into the clouds. Now, very often people will use the likes of weak yellow ochre or weak raw sienna for a little bit of warmth in the clouds. The problem with that is, of course, it can easily form green with the blue. Whereas what will happen here is that if I've got too much blue or too much burnt sienna, it'll simply form grey, which is a sky colour you expect. You don't really expect green. It's not impossible to get green, but you don't really expect it. So again, with the blue starting at the top, and what I'm going to do is sort of make a sort of couple of rough shapes that could be clouds, and then I'm going to rinse my brush, and you didn't need to because I can use this one. I'm going to go in with some of that weak burnt sienna. There we go. Now don't worry, they'll all run, that's fine. Weak burnt sienna. Now already that can sort of look like clouds. That's okay. You know, we've got some reasonable looking cloud shapes there. But if you want the fluffy sort of cotton wool type clouds, then you need to crisp up the edge a little bit. And that can be done just with a little bit of kitchen roll. And just treat that almost like a brush. And you can get your little sort of cotton wool type shapes very easily. And again, it's good to vary things, so you don't want every cloud edge to be crispy and cotton woolly. You want some soft edges as well. Now into that you can also add a cloud shadow. So if the light was, say, coming from the left, we could drop a little bit of our grey into the bottom right, and then that would give a sort of hint of the light coming in. Again, don't, when you first put that in, it doesn't look great, but if you leave it just a few seconds, you can see it already spreading around quite nicely. If it doesn't spread around enough, I think this is, but let's say it wasn't, another little spray with the spritzer. You can see it's going quite well. But if you didn't think so, but leave it a couple of seconds, leave it about 20 seconds before you would start to take any remedial action. And then your little spray is your friend. If anything goes wrong with your sky, simply spray it. Okay, back down there. Now you can see there, something has gone wrong inadvertently because I was talking and that dried. That's got a little bit of line in it. So again, if I spray, assuming it didn't dry completely, if I spray, that should disappear. Almost. There we go. And we'll bring that down, and as my new book's a snow scene book, so what I'm going to do is I'll have the bottom of this as a sort of basic little snow scene. So we'll just get rid of that. Want that to be quite dry, and that's the simplest way of drying your paper. You can just, in fact, the other way to do it is like this. And I know this is slightly going off the snow scene a little bit, but what I'll do while that is still wet, I want to get some sort of misty distance in, and a little bit of ultramarine burnt sienna, and we can get the misty distance in. Now I say misty distance, what will happen of course is because that is wet, the surface is wet, then obviously what will happen there is that the edges will blend. There we go. And again, I'm going to leave that, allow it to dry, and we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. There we go. So what have we got done so far? Right. There we go. Okay, let's go back to our first one, which hopefully will have started to dry now a little bit. So we've got a sky there, and that's just a flat blue one, which, as I say, is fine for many paintings. But we've got a couple of problems here because I was a bit slow. There are a couple of lines in it. So what can we do there? Well, let's go a bit mad. Let's think of a sky with, you know, sometimes we get a sunny sky, but there's also big heavy rain clouds just about to drop a rain shower on us. So what do we do there? And this is now dry, almost dry, not quite. Let me just give it a quick blast with the dryer. There we go. So what do we want with, if you think about a blue sky, it's in the background. And then in front of the blue sky, we will have our dark clouds, if indeed there are any dark clouds. So how do we do that? Well, we just simply paint the dark clouds on top of the blue sky. So let's try that. So again, I'm going to use that mix of the cadmium red and the phthalo blue. And this is when I do this sort of thing at demonstrations and art clubs, this is when there's a collective, what's he done? And the reason is that it looks quite dramatic when it first goes on. So this is what I mean. So if you put a bit of dark on like that, you sort of think, oh, what are you going to do with that? You know, that's awful looking. And this is where our spray comes in and our little tissue. So if I give that a spray, then that will start to make those little edges drift a little bit. Just dry it up again. Don't panic. A bit of spray under here. It'll run. That's okay. You can dry it up. Okay, so now that's a bit more respectable looking as a cloud. And I can just use that little tissue to dry up the edge as it goes. And then I can add to that. So that wasn't enough. I can then add more. And this is I just call this playing with paint. Now it happens to be a sky, but this is a great exercise to loosen up your watercolour. Let's get some of that dark in. Again, this is wet, so that should drift away quite happily by itself. Let's get another one over here. In fact, let's get some different colours. Let's get a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta into it as well. You might think, oh my goodness, what's he done? I'm trying to think that myself, but sure. A little bit of a spray, remember? The spray will soften the edges in a very simple way. When things run, just dry them up. Now, if I'm wanting to get, let's try and get the feel of some rain coming down. So, not quite ready for the rain yet, so let's just dry up those edges. And then I want to get some really strong dark in there. So again, back to that phthalo blue and cadmium red mix. And I want to get this down here, but I don't want it to run this time. So I'm going to, I don't want it to run yet. I want to get a good lot of that on. And then I want it to run. So what I want to happen here is I'm just going to go straight across. And that will just run, should just run down. And this is where you really must leave it alone. And it's working here. You can sort of see the lines of the distant rain shower. Over here, that's a little bit hard. So again, I'm just going to take my brush and just soften that. bring that straight across. Now, how's that going? Well, it's okay, but it's not as dramatic as I would have liked. Remember, the watercolour will always dry lighter than you expect. So here I'm just going to use some of the phthalo blue and the red. I'm just going to get a little bit more drama into it here and there. Maybe a little bit more of the red in there. Now, of course, as you move down your paper, the clouds will appear to get smaller. It's not that they're really getting smaller, but what's happening, of course, is that they're more distant. So the closer clouds are higher up, or they appear to be higher up. The more distant clouds are lower down. Now, I quite like that. This is the sort of thing you get when you're painting this wet and wet or wet against wet. You get these lovely effects that are often quite unexpected. And very often it's really, you didn't have much to do with it, but it can create some beautiful effects. Now we're getting that quite nicely there too. So hopefully that will, again I say hopefully because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. So hopefully that will run down. That's a bit flat. I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. Now I'm sort of seeing I have a good imagination. I'm sort of seeing the shower coming down there. And again, because we have no landscape at the front, we're not really, we don't really know what's happening there. But again, I think I'll make this. Did I make another one the sea? I think I did. Well, we'll make this one the sea because I like the look of this one. And so what I want to do, first of all, is let's just take that wash right down to the bottom. But then, that's a bit odd. Let's fill that in. There we go. But now I quite like the light in the middle, so I'm going to use my tissue and literally just take out a little bit of light in the middle. There we go. Now that all looks a bit strange and unusual at the minute, but that's okay. So I'm going to again leave that. So we'll get back our snow scene. We'll do it next. I'm going to get mixed up on all of these, but I did take careful notes. But then, as I say, when the computer decided to not play ball this morning, I had to change things a little bit. Right, that will do for a little bit later. Now back to this. So we want to do this just as a very simple snow scene. I've already got, if you remember, at the bottom I put in that little extra bit of wash down there, and it's spread and it's got a nice soft edge. So that's really what we're looking for. And I'm going to do something really very, very simple here. And I'll just use the mixture we've got because it honestly doesn't really matter. Snow scenes tend to be fairly monochromatic. And you can see lots about this in my new book, which is Snow Scenes, and it's part of the Take 3 Colours range, and it's, I think, the beginning of October it's published, but it's available for pre-order. And I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing here, but I think Search Press are offering discounts if you buy the books during the festival, so you may be able to get a little bit of a bargain there. So what do we want here? I want to sort of try to indicate a snow-covered field. So in the background, we'll get a little bit of trees. That's still slightly wet, but it's not too wet. A little bit wet there, but I think we're okay. So I'm going to take the flat brush again, and I'm just going to try to get a little vague tree shape here. The thing about the flat brush is that it can give you this nice little broken edge, which can be quite useful. That's not bad for winter trees, or summer trees for that matter. And then I'm just going to change to the round brush here. And with this, I'm just going to try to indicate. So if you have a field here, you would have probably have a little, let's have a little sort of, a couple of little shrubs coming up. I'll just dry that edge. A bit of a drying brush somewhere, but it's gone. Let's just dry it up with that. So with this one, simple little hint of what might be a, sorry, just let me, there we go, that's what I'm looking for, a little sword liner. Sword liners are great little brushes for trees and things. I want this to be fairly strong. So Ultramarine burnt sienna, which should be my sort of standard, sort of go-to dark. We'll keep this fairly simple. Because this is wet, I'm getting that softness. That would be better had I left that a little bit of extra time, but there will be something I can do with that, so there's no real issue. I just need to let it dry a little bit more before I do it. And then we'll keep this little hedgerow going across. Let's make it a bit bigger here. And as it goes across the field, it obviously appears to get smaller because we're going into the distance. And let's maybe get another one sort of coming out from here. So a little bit of simple treatment there. And then in the foreground, as it's a nice sunny day, then we'd be getting some clouds. Now I have to make sure I don't try not to touch this so that it doesn't run into the little shadow that I'm trying to do here. And then of course in snow you get this little these little undulations. Imagine talking about snow in July. Well, in Belfast today, it's sunny one minute and raining the next, so it's not cold, but certainly the idea of snow makes me feel a bit colder. Now, this little up and down movement is to mimic the blanketing effect of the snow. So again, a couple of little to get it a little bit more. And of course, sometimes these little shadows just appear and disappear. So, something like that. Simple little snow scene. So we started off with our sky, and we've got our clouds in it with a little bit of warmth in it. And remember, work top to bottom, do not stop. Now, what I was going to do here, I may still be a little bit too early. Once this area dries enough, I should be able to pull out little bits of light. It's still a little bit too wet, but I'll just do this just to give you an idea of what I was talking about. And that allows me to sort of break up that little background a bit. So, simple little snow scene, sunny sky. So we'll go back now to, well, I think we'll go back to this one, because this one here, because this one possibly is the arguably the most interesting. Now it's still a little bit damp, obviously, because I soaked it well, and we do need to dry it up a little bit. I'm just trying to think whether do we get in it? Can we get a little bit of? No, I thought if it was damp enough, you can pull out sometimes a couple of little rays. It's pulled out a little bit there. Don't want to get too twee with it. Now we'll leave that. I just want to dry that slightly. There we go, that's enough. And for this one, what we do? Well, I think I said a sort of C type skip. So again, ultramarine burnt sienna for a nice dark, or for that matter, now let's stick with the phthalo and the red. And so I want to get a sort of distant land. So let's just again keep it simple. Maybe a little bit more. It's important that when you're talking about water, that the bottom of these land masses stay as flat as you can make them, because obviously water is always horizontal, so therefore it has to be straight. A little bit like that, and then what can we put inside? Well, we could get some. I want to try and keep that light in the middle, so we'll get some darker water over to the left. So let's try this. Again, little light touches with this will help to give me those little lines in it that can suggest water. Again, same on this side. So now we've got the darkness at either side and a little bit of light in the middle. Just bring that across a little bit more. And then on that we could, let's see, another quick dry on that. I'm going to put some little boats into it. Okay, and then we can perhaps suggest that the tide is going out and we've got a few little boats lying at anchor or something. So a little bit of darkness again, and in the distance the little bits of land will end up looking like not much more than these little lines. So we'll get that there, and perhaps then a broader one here, and have that sort of coming out a little bit. Same thing at the other side. And it's not, we don't want to really do much about boats, but we could indicate a couple of little boats perhaps. And one simple way to indicate boats is just actually with a mast. If you have a mast and a little shape at the bottom, well then you've got a boat. So the best thing is not to try too hard actually. Again, a little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom. Remember, the mast is always slightly forward of halfway. And then at the bottom here, this is where obviously closer we are, it's going to be more land in it. A little bit of burnt sienna in there just to warm things up a little bit. And we could probably do that. A couple of little birds. Again, with birds, make sure that you don't overdo it. So a couple of little birds in the sky, simple shapes, Closer birds, you would see a little bit more. So it'd be a little sort of triangle just where the wings meet. Birds in the distance could be no more than just little marks. And because you've got other birds that are more recognizable, these little dots in the distance will also appear to be birds, even though you're not really doing much with them. Birds are always great fun, so you do have to be careful and not do too many. Right, let's see how we're doing for time. It's maybe another couple. We've got our because we've got our sort of wild sky there. We've got our sunny sky there, our slow sun, and let's see how long we've got. Well, we'll do another couple of minutes with this. 10 minutes to go, yes. So we'll only take 5 minutes just to do something with this one. And we can just do a simple little landscape. So we'll get some try a little cottage. No, let's see how when you've got a cottage right sort of again, like trying too hard. Let's get a little bit of a shadow under the front eaves and a couple of windows, and again we'll just take the windows down from that shadow. The reason being that we end up just with one single continuously joined shape instead of lots of different ones. We'll get some. You haven't used any green yet, so we'll pick some Quinacridone gold into that mix. Give us some. And we're going to use this to give us the other side of our roof. Side of the brush gives a reasonable feel for trees. Over here, let's have a distant field. And then a little bit of weaker green. That's cadmium yellow, it's not really doing much. And then we'll keep that green going because that could be coming into the foreground. And vary it as always. You'll get automatic variation because the underlying wash will change the colour as I'm putting this on. So even by using this, as you can see, it looks different there than there. But we'll strengthen that up slightly. Changing the colour all the time. Remember, variety is the spice of life, and it's also the spice of watercolour. So we want nice changes in our colours, nice changes in our tones. That's what gives the painting interest. And on down to the bottom, and then a quick dry just in the mid part. Not sure whether that's enough, but let's see what we get. So a little bit of a stronger, darker green, and we'll get that on sort of here again. With trees, remember, trees don't have even edges. They're all very, very uneven. Again, vary the tone. So we want lights and darks. I suppose we could have a gate in there, could we? Or maybe not. No, the gate would be far too big. A couple of posts. Posts are always good fun. And we'll bring that across and up and in front of our little cottage. And just with the same wash, a couple of little darker bits of tufty grass. That'll do. Okay, so apologies again, folks, for the beginning. Unfortunately, that was beyond my control. I don't know what happened, but everything just stopped working. And so we were a little bit late in starting. Again, tomorrow I'll be back. I'll not actually be doing a live one, which is quite relaxing to think of. But I've pre-recorded a demo of painting staves in North Yorkshire, and that will be on tomorrow afternoon at 2. And I'll be here to answer questions. So if you have any questions for me, I'll be very happy to answer those tomorrow. Don't forget about all the competitions, and don't forget, of course, about all the other stuff that's going on in the Search Press Marquee. Tomorrow we've got Matthew Palmer. I think Matthew's on at 11, and then on Sunday Alison Board, who is on at 12. And meantime, then I'll sort of leave you with this, and so that's a little landscape with the sort of sky with the approaching shower, and then we've got the mad one here with all sorts of things happening. That's not a night you'd want to be out, definitely. And then the final one was the little snow scene. So we'll leave that little snow scene sitting there. Apologies, I haven't even had time to look up and see what sort of comments people were coming in with. But I hope you've enjoyed that, folks. As I say, I'll be back again tomorrow at 2 o'clock with the painting of staves in Yorkshire. And remember, the most important thing about watercolour is keep it wet, keep it flowing, let it run. Once you ruin a few pieces of paper, the worry about ruining paper disappears, really. So it's good to just relax and throw some paint on. It's very, very good for the soul as well. So relax, throw some paint on. You'll get used to the idea of the watercolor flowing, and it's the flowing watercolor that really makes watercolor happen. So until the next time, until tomorrow, folks, thanks for joining me, and enjoy the rest of the Patchings Festival, and enjoy the rest of Search Press's input into that. And thanks again to Monica, who's been holding the fort back at headquarters in Tunbridge Wells. And well, that's about it, folks. So goodbye from me, and I hope to hear from you and see you soon. Thanks. Bye.